Have you ever called your own mother 17 times because you thought you were dying, and discovered that a baby shower mattered more than your life? If you think this story can't get any worse, stay with me, because before it's over, you'll learn how one stranger exposed a 20-year family secret that changed everything I believed about the people who raised me. And before we begin, if you enjoy powerful true-style family stories filled with shocking twists and emotional endings, take 1 second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It really helps the channel, and you won't miss the next unforgettable story. Now let me tell you what happened. I hit the bathroom floor at exactly 2:14 a.m., clutching the right side of my stomach so hard my fingernails dug into my skin. The pain wasn't normal. I knew that immediately. Within minutes, I was dialing my mother's number over and over again, praying she'd answer. She didn't. I called again. And again. And again. By the time I finally stopped, my phone showed something that didn't even seem possible. 17 unanswered calls. When my mother finally responded, it wasn't with a phone call. It wasn't, "Are you okay?" It wasn't, "I'm on my way." It was a text message telling me to stop seeking attention because my sister's baby shower was more important than whatever was happening to me. Less than 4 hours later, doctors were fighting to keep me alive. 3 days after that, I'd wake up from a medically induced coma to discover that an $89,000 hospital bill had already been paid by a man I'd never met. But the money wasn't the biggest surprise. That stranger had spent 20 years keeping a promise to my late father, and he was carrying proof that my mother had been hiding a betrayal so devastating it would destroy our family forever. My name is Holly Crawford. I'm 25 years old, and I've spent the last 5 years working as a firefighter and paramedic in Austin. I've treated countless emergencies. Broken bones. Heart attacks. Car crashes. Appendicitis. I've watched patients arrive with what they thought was simple stomach pain, only to be rushed into emergency surgery an hour later. I knew exactly what the warning signs looked like. That's why, when a stabbing pain ripped through the lower right side of my abdomen during the early hours of February 8th, every instinct I had told me something was terribly wrong. At first, I tried to convince myself it wasn't serious. Maybe I'd pulled a muscle during yesterday's workout. Maybe it was something I ate. Maybe I was overreacting. But the pain didn't fade. It got worse. Within 15 minutes, I couldn't stand up straight. A few minutes later, nausea slammed into me so hard that I barely made it to the bathroom before collapsing onto the cold tile floor. That's when I reached for my phone. My firefighter uniform was hanging neatly over the chair in my bedroom, waiting for my next shift. Usually, I'm the one who shows up when people are scared. Usually, I'm the one telling someone, "You're going to be okay." But that night, I wasn't the rescuer. I was just a terrified daughter hoping her mother would answer the phone. The first call went to voicemail. So did the second. Then the third. I tried calling my stepfather, Roger. Nothing. Back to Mom. Still nothing. Minute after minute slipped away while the pain inside me grew hotter, deeper, and more unbearable. I left desperate messages between gasps for air. "Mom, please answer. This isn't just a stomachache. I really need you." By my 8th call, my hands were shaking uncontrollably. By the 13th, fear had completely replaced embarrassment. "Mom, please. I'm scared." When I placed the 17th call, I couldn't even speak anymore. I cried into her voicemail, ended the call, and stared at my screen through tears. 17 outgoing calls. Not one call back. Then, at 3:41 a.m., my phone finally buzzed. The streets of Austin were almost empty as I pulled out of my apartment complex. Normally, I loved driving before sunrise. The roads were quiet, the city peaceful. That morning, every traffic light felt like an enemy. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Stay awake," I whispered to myself. "You've treated patients like this. You know what to do." Halfway there, another surge of pain exploded through my abdomen. I slammed on the brakes and pulled onto the shoulder. The moment I opened the driver's door, I vomited onto the pavement. For a second I stayed there, bent over, fighting the dizziness threatening to pull me into darkness. No. Not here. Not now. I climbed back into the driver's seat, wiped my mouth with my sleeve, and forced myself forward. Every block became a countdown. 5 more intersections. 4. 3. Don't close your eyes. Just keep breathing. At exactly 4:02 a.m., I turned into the emergency entrance at St. David's Medical Center. I managed to shift the car into park. I reached for the door handle. The moment my feet touched the ground, my legs completely gave out beneath me. The pavement rushed toward my face. Somewhere nearby someone shouted, "Get a stretcher. Move." Then, nothing. Voices floated through the darkness before I could see anything. Blood pressures dropping. Heart rates climbing. She's septic. Bright lights flashed above me as I drifted in and out of consciousness. The ceiling moved overhead while nurses pushed my stretcher through the emergency department. Someone squeezed my shoulder. "Holly?" I recognized the voice. Nurse Amy. We'd trained together during emergency response exercises. She leaned close enough that I could finally focus on her face. "You hear me?" I nodded weakly. "Burst appendix," I whispered. "Sepsis." "I know," she answered immediately. "We're taking care of you." She glanced toward another nurse. "We need emergency contacts." Then she looked back at me. "Who's your next of kin?" "My mom." I forced out my mother's phone number. Amy hurried away. The room became a blur of movement. 4 lines. Monitors. Doctors giving rapid instructions. About 2 minutes later Amy returned. Her expression had changed. I couldn't reach her. My stomach sank harder than the pain itself. "My stepdad." I whispered Roger's number. She disappeared again. When she returned, she didn't have to say anything. I could already read the answer on her face. No response there either. She hesitated. "Holly, anyone else?" The question echoed inside me. Anyone else? I searched my mind. Friends? Co-workers? Neighbors? At that moment every name felt impossibly far away. I slowly shook my head. "No." Amy squeezed my hand. "Then we'll stay with you." Those simple words almost broke me. Because the people responsible for saving strangers had become the only people standing beside me. Not my family. The trauma surgeon entered moments later. Dr. Okafor. Another familiar face from joint emergency training. His calm expression disappeared the second he examined me. "We're going straight to surgery. No waiting. It's ruptured." I tried asking something. Maybe how bad it was. Maybe if I was going to be okay. I'm not sure. Everything around me began fading into white. The operating room lights became distant stars. Then darkness swallowed everything. I don't remember the surgery. The hospital later filled in every missing piece. The operation began just before sunrise. The surgical team confirmed exactly what everyone feared. The appendix had completely burst. Infection had spread throughout my abdomen. Sepsis was already advancing. Dr. Okafor and his team worked as fast as they could, removing damaged tissue and cleaning the infection before it spread further. Then something went terribly wrong. At 6:27 a.m., alarms exploded throughout the operating room. My heart slipped into a deadly rhythm. Within seconds, it stopped beating effectively. Years later I listened to the surgical recording. Even hearing it made my hands shake. Charging. Clear. The sound of the defibrillator echoed through the room. No heartbeat. Chest compressions began immediately. Medication. Another shock. Still no stable rhythm. Voices remained calm, but underneath them I could hear urgency growing. No one wanted to lose a healthy 25-year-old woman over a ruptured appendix. Then, one final shock. Silence. A heartbeat returned. Steady. Strong. Someone announced. "We've got her back." Dr. Okafor asked one question. Downtime? 43 seconds. 43 seconds. That was how long my heart had been gone. 43 seconds between life and death. The surgery continued successfully after that, but my fight wasn't over. Because when the heart stops, the brain suffers too. The doctors made another difficult decision. They placed me into a medically induced coma. For the next 3 days, machines would breathe for me while medication protected my brain from further injury. Before leaving the operating room, Dr. Okafor asked another question. Did anyone reach her family? A nurse quietly answered. We've called repeatedly. No one's answered. He paused. Then spoke words that later appeared in my medical record. Document every attempt. Keep trying. Someone needs to know their daughter almost died. The calls continued. Morning. Afternoon. Night. Again. And again. Every voicemail was left. Every emergency contact was tried. Every call went unanswered. Meanwhile, my family was preparing decorations, wrapping baby shower gifts, taking smiling photos, laughing together. Completely unaware, or perhaps unwilling to care, that I was lying unconscious in intensive care. But while they ignored every phone call from the hospital, someone else had already learned exactly what had happened to me. And before I ever opened my eyes again, that stranger made a decision that would change my life forever. The first thing I remember was a voice calling my name. Soft. Patient. Almost comforting. Holly, can you hear me? My eyelids felt impossibly heavy. Every breath burned my throat, and the bright lights overhead blurred together until they slowly came into focus. A nurse smiled when she saw my eyes open. There you are, she whispered. Welcome back. It took me several seconds to understand where I was. Then memories came rushing back. Bathroom floor. 17 unanswered calls. The drive. The emergency room. What happened? I croaked. She helped me take a small sip of water before answering. You've been asleep for 3 days. 3 days. The words didn't seem real. You had emergency surgery. There were complications, but you're safe now. Complications. I knew exactly what medical professionals meant when they used that word. It usually meant something almost went terribly wrong. My heart. The nurse nodded gently. It stopped during surgery. I closed my eyes. Even as a paramedic, hearing those words about yourself feels different. I had spent years bringing strangers back from the edge. Now I had been the one lying on that table. My mom. It was the first question that mattered. The nurse's smile slowly disappeared. She pulled a chair beside my bed before speaking. Holly, we've been trying to reach your family since the night you came in. I waited. We called every number you gave us. Still waiting. No one came. Those 3 words hurt more than the surgical incision across my abdomen. No one? She slowly shook her head. We left messages. We called over and over. We contacted social services. I'm so sorry. I stared at the ceiling. 3 days. Not 3 hours. Not one missed phone call. 3 entire days. My family had lived their lives while machines kept me alive. The nurse stayed with me for nearly an hour. She explained every tube attached to my body. The medications. The infection. The recovery ahead. She never rushed me. When she finally stood to leave, she smiled warmly. You've got a lot of people rooting for you here. I almost laughed. Funny how complete strangers could make you feel less alone than your own relatives. Around lunchtime, someone knocked on my door. Instead of another nurse, a woman wearing business attire stepped inside carrying a folder. She introduced herself as Rita from the hospital's billing department. I know this isn't ideal timing, she said apologetically, but I wanted to update your account. My stomach tightened. Emergency surgery. 3 days in intensive care. Cardiac arrest. I knew hospital bills weren't small. Even with insurance, I expected years of payments. How bad is it? Rita looked down at the paperwork before smiling. Actually, your balance is 0. I frowned. I'm sorry? Your entire bill has already been paid. I blinked. I don't understand. She opened the folder. An individual paid everything yesterday. Every charge. Completely in full. I stared at her. How much? She hesitated only briefly. $89,000. The number echoed through my mind. Almost $90,000. Paid. Without anyone contacting me. Without permission. Without explanation. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. She turned the receipt so I could read it myself. Every procedure. Every medication. Every ICU charge. At the bottom. Paid in full. My eyes dropped to the payer's name. Vincent Murphy. I searched my memory. Nothing. No relative. No family friend. No donor. No patient. Nobody by that name had ever existed in my life. Who is he? Rita shook her head. He didn't leave much information. Only one sentence. She pointed toward the memo section. For Holly Crawford. A promise kept. A promise? What promise? I had absolutely no idea what it meant. Long after Rita left, I continued staring at that receipt. A complete stranger had done something my own family never would. He had removed the one burden I expected to carry for years. Why? What could I possibly have done to deserve that? Nothing made sense. Finally, I picked up my phone. Maybe everything had been a misunderstanding. Maybe my mother never received the hospital's calls. Maybe she'd been worried sick. I typed the message slowly. Mom. I'm awake. I was in a coma. My heart stopped during surgery. Please come. I pressed send. 5 minutes later. She read it. I watched the tiny read notification appear beneath the message. 5 minutes. No reply. 10 minutes. Nothing. 30 minutes. Still nothing. An hour passed. Silence. I sent another message. This time to Brit. I'm in ICU. Can you come? She read it too. No answer. Not even a single question asking if I was okay. I finally placed the phone on my bedside table and turned my face toward the window. Outside, life continued normally. Inside, something in me was quietly breaking. At exactly 2 o'clock that afternoon, my phone finally rang. Mom. Relief flooded through me. I answered immediately. Mom. Her voice sounded irritated. I got your message. That was it. No panic. No tears. No apology. I almost died, I whispered. I know. The hospital kept calling. I waited for the words every daughter expects. I'm coming. I'm sorry. Are you okay? Instead she sighed. It really wasn't good timing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What? Brit's baby shower was happening. There was so much going on. My throat tightened. My heart stopped. But it didn't stay stopped, she replied matter-of-factly. You're awake now. So everything worked out. I sat frozen. Then she continued. I'll probably stop by later. But I need you to do something first. I swallowed. What? I need you to ask your doctor if they'll discharge you early. I stared at the phone. I just woke up from a coma. Doctors always keep people longer than necessary. You'll recover better at home. No, I answered quietly. They told me I still need treatment. She sounded annoyed. Just ask. For me. Then. She hung up. No, I love you. No, I'm glad you're alive. Only one request. Leave the hospital. I didn't know it yet. But my mother's desperation to get me discharged had nothing to do with my recovery. I sat frozen after that call, trying to understand what had just happened. But my mother's desperation to get me discharged had nothing to do with my recovery. She was terrified of someone finding me first. And the man who had paid every cent of my hospital bill was already on his way to my room, with answers that would change everything I believed about my family. My mother arrived less than 2 hours later. Not running. Not crying. Not relieved. She stepped into my hospital room as if she were stopping by to pick up paperwork. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't even come close enough to touch my hand. Instead, her eyes moved around the room, studying everything. The monitors. The 4 bags. The medical chart hanging beside my bed. Finally she looked at me. So. Did you ask about leaving? For a second I thought I'd misunderstood. I just woke up. I know. So ask. The sooner you're discharged, the better. I stared at her in disbelief. Mom, why? She crossed her arms. Hospitals overcharge people. They'll keep you here forever if you let them. The doctor said I still have sepsis. They're monitoring my heart. She waved a dismissive hand. Doctors always exaggerate. You'll recover fine at home. The words landed like ice. I almost died. My heart had stopped. And somehow, the biggest concern in her mind was getting me out of the hospital. Before I could respond, someone knocked on the open door. Dr. Okafor entered carrying my chart. He greeted me with a warm smile. Good afternoon, Holly. How are you feeling today? Before I could answer, my mother stepped forward. Doctor, I'm Holly's mother. I wanted to ask about her discharge. Dr. Okafor's expression immediately became professional. She's not ready. Not even close. But she's awake now. That doesn't change the medical facts. He flipped through the chart. She survived severe sepsis. She suffered cardiac arrest. She spent 3 days in a medically induced coma. She remains on intravenous antibiotics. We're monitoring her cardiac rhythm around the clock. My mother's jaw tightened. There has to be some flexibility. There isn't. He met her eyes calmly. Your daughter died on my operating table. We brought her back. I'm not risking her life a second time. Silence filled the room. Then he turned toward me. Holly. If anyone pressures you to leave before you're medically ready, you have every right to refuse. I nodded immediately. I'm staying. Good. He smiled gently. That's the correct decision. Without another word he left. The room became painfully quiet. My mother grabbed her purse. I guess you've made your choice. She turned toward the hallway without saying goodbye. She almost made it to the elevator. Then she stopped. Someone was standing there. A tall man. Gray hair. Military posture. Even from my hospital bed I noticed the sudden change in my mother's face. Every bit of color disappeared. Her breathing became shallow. She looked frightened. Not uncomfortable. Not surprised. terrified. The two of them exchanged only a few quiet words I couldn't hear. Then my mother hurried away so fast she almost broke into a run. I watched the elevator doors close behind her. Who was that man? And why had seeing him frightened her more than hearing I nearly died? A few minutes later Nurse Jennifer returned. She looked shaken. Holly. She sat beside my bed. I've worked in critical care for 15 years. I've seen complicated families. I've seen estranged families. But I've never seen parents ignore nearly 30 emergency calls and then spend their entire visit trying to convince their child to leave the hospital. I looked down at my blanket. My sister had a baby shower. Jennifer's eyes softened. I know. I'm so sorry. She squeezed my hand. As long as you're here, you're safe. Her words meant more than she'd probably realized. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure home was actually safe anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. My mother's reaction kept replaying inside my head. Not when I mentioned almost dying. Not when Dr. Okafor explained the cardiac arrest. Only when she saw that gray-haired stranger. Who was he? And why did she look like she'd seen a ghost? The answer came the following morning. Around 10:30, Jennifer knocked softly before entering. You have a visitor. I frowned. I do? She smiled. He introduced himself as Vincent Murphy. My heartbeat instantly quickened. The name. The one on the hospital receipt. The man who had somehow paid $89,000 without ever meeting me. I nodded slowly. Please send him in. Jennifer stepped aside. A man in his early 60s entered the room. Tall. Broad shoulders. Short gray hair. Everything about the way he carried himself screamed military discipline. But his eyes. His eyes were kind. He stopped several feet from my bed, giving me space. Holly. My name is Vincent Murphy. His voice was calm. I know this is unexpected. I'm sorry to intrude while you're recovering. I swallowed. Why did you pay my hospital bill? Instead of answering immediately, he reached into his jacket and carefully removed an old photograph. He walked closer before placing it gently into my hands. The moment I looked down, my breath caught. A young soldier smiled back at me. He was holding a little girl in his arms. Me. My father. It was the clearest picture of him I'd ever seen. I barely remembered his face. I was only 5 when he died overseas. My fingers trembled. You knew my dad? Vincent smiled sadly. I did. We served together. He wasn't just my friend. He saved my life. The room fell silent. He died protecting me. I couldn't speak. 20 years. 20 years had passed without anyone telling me stories about my father. Without photographs. Without memories. Now a complete stranger was handing them back to me. Tears blurred my vision. Then. Why now? Vincent took a slow breath. Because before your father died, he asked me for one thing. He made me promise I'd watch over you. I looked at him in disbelief. He talked about me? He talked about you constantly. A faint smile crossed Vincent's face. He said his little girl wanted to become a firefighter. He believed you'd spend your life helping people. He asked me never to let anyone erase him from your life. My chest tightened. My mother always said. He never talked about me. Vincent slowly shook his head. That wasn't true. He adored you. He carried your pictures everywhere. I lowered my head as tears rolled onto the hospital blanket. For the first time in years, I felt close to my father again. After giving me a few moments to collect myself, Vincent reached into his briefcase. This time he removed a thick folder. His expression changed. It became much more serious. Holly, Everything I've told you so far is only the beginning. I've spent 20 years quietly keeping my promise. I've watched from a distance. I've made sure you were safe. And during those 20 years, I discovered something your mother hoped you would never learn. He slowly opened the folder. Inside were legal documents. Bank records. Government forms. My father's name appeared across several pages. Vincent looked directly into my eyes. What I'm about to show you is the real reason your mother wanted you out of this hospital before I could find you. He slid the first document across the table. The moment I read the title, I realized my entire life had been built on a lie. Vincent waited until I looked up before speaking again. Do you know what this is? I glanced back at the document. It was my father's military life insurance policy. I recognized the government logo immediately. As a firefighter who often worked alongside veterans, I'd seen similar paperwork before. I know what it is, I answered quietly. What I don't understand is why you're showing it to me. Vincent folded his hands. Because your father planned for your future. He pointed to several highlighted lines. When Sergeant Michael Crawford died, this policy paid out $400,000. I stared at the number. 400,000. It was divided exactly as your father requested. He continued calmly. 200,000 went to your mother. 100,000 was placed in trust for your sister. And 100,000. He looked directly at me. Belonged to you. My mouth went dry. I never received anything. I know. You weren't supposed to receive it until you turned 25. I turned 25 weeks ago. I know. Did anyone ever contact you? No. Did your mother ever tell you about this trust? I slowly shook my head. Never. Vincent opened another document. This is where everything changes. He slid a notarized release form across the table. It authorized the trust to release both daughters' money. I studied the signatures. One belonged to Britt. The other supposedly belonged to me. But it wasn't mine. Not even close. The handwriting. The shape of the letters. Everything was different. I looked up. I never signed this. I know. I wasn't even in Austin that week. I was completing paramedic clinicals in San Antonio. Vincent nodded. I verified that. Silence filled the room. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. So, my mother forged my signature? Yes. And she took my inheritance? Yes. I closed my eyes. Every conversation from the last several years suddenly replayed inside my mind. The time I couldn't afford emergency surgery for my dog. When I asked for help buying a reliable car. Every moment she claimed money was tight. Every time she called me irresponsible. Meanwhile, she already had my money. Vincent quietly placed more papers on the bed. Wedding invoices. Property records. Vehicle purchases. Every page connected to Britt. Your sister's wedding. Her house. Her new SUV. The money traces back to your inheritance. I stared at the numbers. My chest felt hollow. I don't think Britt knew. Vincent nodded. I don't believe she did either. She accepted what she was told. But your mother knew. And your stepfather knew. I covered my face with both hands. 20 years. My father died believing his daughters would both be protected. Instead, one daughter had everything. The other was told to struggle alone. Vincent remained silent until I looked at him again. What do I do now? You tell the truth. My mother will deny everything. Not with this evidence. He tapped the folder. I've spent years collecting records. Every transfer. Every signature. Every legal document. It all leads back to one person. I swallowed. This will destroy my family. Vincent's expression softened. Holly. The family you deserved should never have abandoned you. You aren't destroying anything. You're exposing what already exists. His words settled deep inside me. For years I'd blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I was too emotional. Too difficult. Too needy. But lying in that hospital bed. After surviving sepsis. After dying for 43 seconds. After learning my own inheritance had been stolen. Something inside me finally changed. No. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. 2 weeks later I left the hospital. Dr. Okafor refused to discharge me until every infection marker was normal. For the first time, I appreciated someone refusing to bend under pressure. Outside the hospital, Vincent was waiting. He didn't treat me like someone he pitied. He treated me like family. Together we met with attorneys. The evidence was overwhelming. Forgery. Identity theft. Fraud. Every document strengthened the case. Still, the lawyers suggested giving my mother one opportunity. One chance to admit the truth before criminal charges were filed. The confrontation was scheduled during a family gathering at Britt's house. Everyone would be there. There would be witnesses. No lies. No rewriting history. Only facts. That evening changed everything. In front of relatives, friends, and military veterans who had known my father. The truth came out. Vincent presented every document. Every signature. Every bank transfer. Every dollar. My sister broke down crying when she realized her dream wedding and new home had been financed with money that belonged to both of us. She hadn't known. My stepfather finally admitted he had known about the trust. My mother's excuses collapsed one after another. Then I shared something no document could show. I told everyone about the night my appendix ruptured. The 17 unanswered phone calls. The text telling me to stop seeking attention. The 28 hospital calls nobody returned while I lay unconscious. The room fell completely silent. No one defended her anymore. Before leaving, I looked at my mother one final time. My father died protecting people. You stole the future he died to give me. You chose a celebration while I fought for my life. You don't get to call that love. Then I walked away. The legal battle didn't last long. Faced with overwhelming evidence, my mother agreed to repay everything. The settlement returned the inheritance that should have been mine years earlier. I paid off my debts. Started saving for a home. Donated part of the money in my father's honor to support wounded veterans. For the first time since childhood, I felt like I was building a future instead of surviving one. But the greatest gift wasn't the money. It was finally knowing who my father really was. Through Vincent, I met the men who had served beside him. They shared photographs I'd never seen. Stories my mother had hidden. Letters my father had written before deploying. One afternoon, Vincent handed me a small box. Inside were my father's military dog tags. They belong with you now, he said. The moment I held them, I felt connected to him in a way I never had before. Not through grief. Through pride. Months later, I visited my father's grave with Vincent. We stood there in silence as the wind moved through the trees. Vincent rested a hand on the headstone. I kept my promise. I placed my hand beside his. So did I. I had become the firefighter my father always believed I would be. Not because someone made life easy. Because I refused to let betrayal define me. The people who ignored my cries for help no longer controlled my future. The stranger who kept a promise reminded me what real family looks like. Family isn't determined by blood. It's built through loyalty. Through sacrifice. Through showing up when someone needs you most. And sometimes, the person who saves your life isn't the one who gave you life. It's the one who chooses not to walk away. The end.